I'm here with my good friend, Skye, and we have not rehearsed this conversation. So I don't know what I'm going to get, but hopefully I will be able to publish a lot of this one because I've known Skye for many years. And he's going to give us a little bit of background about what he's done in the last couple of years, but we have some juicy topics to talk about. Skye, how about you introduce yourself and then I'll talk about the topics of today and we take it from there.
Thanks, Sharon. It's wonderful to be here with you today. Hello, everybody. Skye Nicoles. I'm the General Manager of Operations and Transformation for Canon Oceania. I've been in this role specifically for 3.5 years. Came back during the middle of COVID, so I had an enjoyable time in lockdown for 2 weeks. But we've been on a very exciting journey over the past 3 years here at Canon as we've looked to align all of the businesses across Oceania on our core platforms. So there's a big journey in there and there's lots that we'll unpack through the conversation.
So, I was catching up with Skye after a couple of years. And of course, we talk about family and friends, but both of us have this passion for transformation. I'm a transformation and acceleration girl, and Skye is the same from finance point of view. Of course, we're going to be talking about that. So I know that you talked about investment framework. I'm going to get to the juicy part first. Tell us what that is, how you go about it. Teach us how you would embed that into a company once you come on board.
Great question. And this is what I actually presented at Crown when we met that day. This is actually the topic I discussed. Let's start with kind of the typical environment, first of all. Sometimes you're going to cut all that stuff, right?
I'll cut anything you
cut anything out. Right, a bit of blooper session there. So the landscape at the time when I came into the role here, I was given a brief by the managing director at the time, and that was to find a way to maximise the value of our capital that was being spent and embed some processes and framework to ensure that it was aligned with what he wanted to get done. And so prior to me coming, there was really no process. It was simply, if you had a good idea, submit the idea and IT would need to review it.
All right.
The problem with that is that the idea may not have been connected to the strategy. And so it goes into this ether of nowhere. And there was no real process around aligning the thought process with actually what the shareholder wanted to invest in. And so the first thing was really, who's ultimately accountable for the shareholder funds? It's the executive team. So the managing director or the board, then the executive team. And so we wanted to start there. And so we wanted to really make sure that any idea connected to transformation had to go through a member of that executive team first to get ratification that this was a good idea and something that connects to strategy.
So just one point for everyone that is listening, remember both if you are hiring someone or if you are going for senior roles, the point that Skye was mentioning, there was a problem and they approached him specifically for that problem. So a lot of times when we come on board to fix something. So how did you get an understanding of what's going on in the company before you implement something?
Lots and lots of questions and lots of conversations, really. You've really got to understand the landscape. You've got to, what they talk about, seek to understand first. Thankfully, in my own experience, I had been 4 years at Canon New Zealand. So I understood the landscape in terms of what the problems were from a non-head office function perspective, but I now needed to understand what it was like within the head office environment and what were some of the political challenges, where the control points were, who the influencers were, really how they connected, how they thought about their ideas. And so lots of conversations at a peer level, at a level above me and levels below, just to really understand what was the root cause of driving the capital investment requests. And it really became obvious in those conversations that the crude example I give is I was at a barbecue on the weekend with a friend. They told me about this piece of technology. I then came in on Monday and submitted an idea and said we should do this. That's a crude example I gave of what was happening. And we wanted to get away from the randomness of ideas coming through and really connect it back to what does the shareholder want us to focus on, and how do we get everyone's minds thinking aligned with the shareholder. And once we can do that, then the initiatives start to reduce and become of more value to the shareholder because that aligns to their strategies.
So at the early stages of the work, you started to understand what's happening in the headquarters, and then what did you do? How did you, I'm particularly interested in when you were rolling out the idea, you get pushback or you get faces that they don't say anything, but they don't understand. So what did you do with that?
So first we had to start with the sponsor. And so the first person that I had to engage after the research and providing, I guess, a framework or a recommendation on the way in which we should go forward, I had to go back to the managing director and say, this is what you asked me to do. Here's the research I've done. Here's what I think we need to do. And I had to take them and get their buy-in. So once I had their buy-in, I then had to go to his lead team, which is the executive team, and get their buy-in. Once I had their buy-in, I then went down to my peer level, which is the general managers. And then once we had that buy-in, we then started to roll that out across the whole business. But My message to the managing director at the time was, I need your complete support because it's a fundamental mind shift. All right, so if you think about the landscape, we're dealing with a corporate office, if you like, in Sydney. We're dealing with regional locations being in New Zealand or the Philippines. We're also dealing with dominant business units being the sales and marketing division versus not so dominant business units being the corporate services functions. So there was a lot of complexity, and we established 6 guiding principles that we put forward and said these are the guiding principles, and one of those was everybody across all functions and all businesses had to get some level of investment. So it couldn't be dominated by any one part. We spent a lot of time on setting those guiding principles to support the framework. That as we rolled this out, we could always say, we understand that you need all these things done, Group A, but Group B hasn't had any work done, so we need to give them some time.
You mentioned something about full support of a sponsor or managing director. Was there any time that you needed to go to him or her?
It's multiple times,
Right.
particularly early on. And it actually started really at the general manager level. We had some dominant personalities who were trying to push things through that were not aligned with the framework, not aligned with the strategy. So I had to step in with him and say, we're getting these requests. I need you to talk to your member of your leadership team, who they report to get them realigned to the strategy. So we would get an endorsement at the execo, but the endorsement sometimes was a bit of a face. You don't really buy into it. And so it just took a lot of repetition. And if you are consistent with your behaviour, consistent with your approach and fair, people eventually align with it.
Yeah.
They're looking for the cracks. We spent a lot of time controlling that wall. The message I would get, you're slowing us down, Skye, you're slowing us down. And what I would say is sometimes you've got to slow down to align to go faster.
Very true. Right. If you step away from this role, would the framework stick?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, the framework's embedded. I have a group transformation manager who governs it. I sit for the next level of governance on it. But this guides the thinking, the investment in resources, and the investment in initiatives to deliver the strategy. And it's a framework that doesn't need me around to exist. It's established and it's published and very clear for everyone to follow.
Just before we move on to the next topic, in terms of timeline, you said it's 3 years into it. How much was your analyze and discovery and all that? How long was the earliest stages? And when was the time that you said, okay, this thing has been installed?
Yeah, so 0 to 3 months was the seek to understand phase. At 3 months, presented back the first recommendation, and then it took about 18 months for me to say it's now in, it's now functioning. So 18 months. There's lots of processes, lots of governance underneath it, a lot of stakeholder engagement. It's a very engaging process that we go through, but I'd say a year and a half was when it was finally embedded. And so for the last year, it's just been very seamless.
The reason I asked this one, that I've always been in transformation, mostly transformation with Agile. The first thing that everyone is asking me, how long is going to take us? And most of the time we need to get a consulting firm to come in and help us with the structure or with the framework. And one of the things that we always need to either manage with the senior leadership team or with our team internally is that the timeline. I personally haven't seen anything less than a year or 2 years to I consider embedded.
Yeah. It also depends on the level of engagement at the Exco.
Yes.
Yeah. We had a very determined managing director who had the strong enough personality to deal with his personalities that were very strong. And unfortunately, sometimes change is required there. But yeah, a lot of people will come in and say it's quick, it's 6 months to 12. No, to embed so it exists without you takes a lot of reinforcement.
Very true.
And again, the players that are involved in that process need to have no agenda apart from delivering the outcome for the best interest of the shareholder and the business.
All right. So you said something about personality. I think it's a good segue to the topic of politics.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is something that everyone wants to talk, but nobody wants to talk about it because we don't want to admit it, because we are in white-collar companies. Which sometimes I feel like it would have been a lot easier if we were in blue-collar companies and say, you, me, out there, we're going to sort it. But we don't. When we're sitting on a table and just, let me get back to you. No, I don't want you to get back to me. Just tell me, what do you think?
Yeah.
What's your definition of politics? How do you detect it?
My definition of politics, it's a good question. My simple response to that is when there is misalignment with the purpose of why that role exists and it becomes a personal agenda, that you're being political. The mindset always needs to be what is in the best interest of X. My circumstance, the way I think about it is, I create value for shareholders, and so everything I need to think about is about creating value for the shareholder. It's never about me. And so even to the point where I have no problem creating an environment where my role doesn't exist anymore, because that's the right thing to do for the shareholder. Now, inevitably, I always get a new role, and so I never tend to have to worry about that. But political people, in my mind, have a self-agenda that can be driven from many things. It can be self-esteem, it can be confidence, it can be trust, it can be many different aspects as to why they behave that way. But I think a lot of it comes down to a little bit of mistrust or a little bit of ego probably drives a political mindset. But I think it's very self-serving and very short-minded, and the value is never fully achieved for the business.
Yeah.
Why are we giving that away? And what I found, everyone told me at the time, oh, it's not possible. And so my question simply was, do we all agree that we work for the same company? And that is Oceania. The answer was yes. I said, then if we agree that we all work for the same company, does it matter where the margin sits? And they looked at me with a perplexed view. And what I was really saying was, let's not be political. If it costs, if as at a group level, we can take the margin from the third party and bring it in-house, does it matter which business unit has that margin sitting in it? And as people came to terms with that question, they started to realise what I was saying, which was the only reason you haven't been able to bring it back in-house is because you've got an internal political fight over where the margin sits.
Yes.
So why don't we not worry about that, and let's focus on what's best for Oceania. So as they took them on that journey and developed the cost-benefit analysis, I was able to show them there was over $500,000 worth of value for the group.
For the group. It's an amazing. So the key 2 points that I call everyone's attention to is that if you want to identify an area to improve in a business, look at vendors and margins. That's the thing that you need to scan, and I always look at that as well. That's the key thing that you can look for, opportunity potentially. Because smart is in knowing where to look, because after that is the decision is easy, but which part of this whole enterprise am I looking at? That's one point. The second one is that looking at the enterprise architecture and how it's been designed might not necessarily be in your favor. So one of the things that we need to be ready as transformation agents is that we look past the enterprise structure, look at what's needed to be implemented, of course, bring everyone with us through the journey and make the change and implement that. But then the next thing is that revisit the OKRs, KPIs, and then how success has been defined for each business unit. And that's the next activity that we need to do to make sure that this case or similar cases also will get visited. So that is something that I was really keen to know, because particularly in this part of the world we are, ensuring and the decision-making about it is a critical type of decision-making.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that, I know that you are doing a lot of mentoring, or if people want to reach out to you and ask questions, what's the best way to find you?
LinkedIn's always the best place to come, but always available to provide any thoughts for anyone. If they've got any questions, always open to give back as required.
So yes, I definitely recommend reaching out to Skye if you want to talk about transformation, if you want someone to validate an idea for you, if you want mentorship, definitely a good person to have in your corner. All right, that's it.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.